All right, now we'll stop right there. And so I just want to say this. So this is what the leadership of the church has decided to do. They're not asking him to step down indefinitely. They're asking him to step away for just a little while so that he can regain some of the clarity that he needs to be able to remember where certain boundaries are so that he will not cross those lines. And again, the boundaries are coarse, jesting and joking, but not necessarily sexually inappropriate advances toward a woman that is not his wife. So that's very, very important, because the clickbait side of this is that the internet has been exploding with accusations of adultery here. And unless you want to be an incredibly cynical person, and grab your crystal ball and suppose that you know things that nobody else knows except for the people that are intimately involved in these details, then I think it's just fair to say that we have to at least put what Matt is saying in the context of saying it being co-signed by the elders of this church, and suggest that if we don't take at face value what he's saying, then everybody involved here is absolutely lying, except for the woman that got the DMs and her family. But everybody else is colluding to lie with Matt Chandler. So I think, again, it's awfully cynical to suggest that that's what took place. We all know that he was trying to get her digits. He was trying to take it too far, and yada, yada, yada. So, like, we don't know that information. It's pure conjecture for you to jump to that conclusion. So as far as we know, they were not sexual in nature. They were just inappropriate for a pastor and a congregant. Now, the other thing I would say is that there's been a lot of chitter chatter on Twitter about the contriteness and the arrogance of Chandler as he gave this presentation. But all I can say to you is that as I look at this, I come away with a totally different understanding. Maybe it's because I've been in leadership before and I know how difficult it must be to perhaps say these kind of things to a room full of people whom you've pastored. I don't envy him to have to do this. Now, did he bring it upon himself? Yes, absolutely. But the point is that he seems contrite. He seems broken over the fact that he was not able to recognize the lines that he was crossing in this relationship and in these messages. And so now the question remains, what do we make of the fact that Chandler had to step down from his church in the wake of this scandal? And so the first thing I would just tell you is this, is that the one thing that I think we can bring from what we just heard from Chandler is this, that the church is really a great institution when you think about it. Now, before you blow me up down in the comments section, I know a lot of you probably have butthurt in the past because of things that took place at church, but please hear me out on this. What we just saw, if we take it at face value, and I've tried to do the best that I can to give you the reason for why I think we should, at least at this point until more information is given, that the accountability that we see on display at Village Church is at least admirable. Let me ask you a question. Where else does this happen? Where else do you see an institution that holds integrity with such high regard that when a pastor comes along and is foolishly joking with another woman in an inappropriate fashion, that organization immediately jumps to and they do something about it and they remove the leader from leadership for a period of time? This shows that not only accountability seems to be working at Village Church, but it also shows this, that the church is an institution that cares about integrity uniquely in society. I mean, for crying out loud, guys, Bill Gates goes around banging subordinates at Microsoft while he's married, and then he goes out into the third world and sterilizes people, but because he says climate change every other sentence, we praise him as a hero in the press and in other places. Like, we don't hold these people to account. And I hear this stuff all the time when we finally talk about these kind of things going on in corporate settings and the diversity, equity, and inclusion of trying to make diversity so big and caring about how many gay people you employ instead of actually doing a good job. And then when Christians come along and say, hey, this is not what character looks like. You guys are all so worried about superficial external things that you're not actually worried about real character, then wait for the Twitter mob to jump on us and say, well, I thought you guys were all about forgiveness, and I thought you guys were about Jesus and grace and him being loving to other people. Why all of a sudden being so judgmental? Well, I think it's really interesting. The moment a pastor does anything like this, just wait. Twitter will jump to, just like you expect them to do, to jump on board and bash this guy without recognizing a very simple fact, that it is the church that is held to a position of accountability in the culture like no other institution. And this is an implicit acknowledgement in the conversation that you see on Twitter and in other places right now who are outraged by what took place with Matt Chandler. And so I'm okay with people questioning, and I'm okay with people having some doubts about Chandler's sincerity and all of that stuff. I think that's all things that you don't really know. So I think it's a little bit foolish to waste a lot of time doing that. I think what we can say beyond a shadow of a doubt is the church is still uniquely a place of integrity and uniquely a place that cares about morality in a society that is deeply eroding constantly. But it didn't stop people from Twitter from saying things like this. I know this. Megachurch pastors like Matt Chandler, president of Acts 29, don't have to make public announcements to take leaves of absence for just foolish joking. That doesn't cross more serious boundaries. They spent a lot of time crafting this language. Now, maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. But I think what our buddy here in WatchKeep is saying is exactly what I was trying to say before, is that she's incredulous about it, but I'm affirming about it. She's incredulous about the fact that a church would actually hold their pastor to such a high standard that foolish joking becomes a problem. But it is, after all, a biblical imperative that they're drawing their critique of Chandler from. So she's incredulous. She cannot believe that a church would make a pastor sit down because of foolish joking. And I'm saying this. If we take the story at face value, at least at this point, which you have no other evidence to suggest otherwise, it's just what we're seeing here is an implicit acknowledgement of the integrity that church as an institution has writ large. Not all churches, not all pastors, but the church as an institution is still hanging on to integrity while the rest of the world doesn't care. And by the way, if we're so upset about what just took place at Matt Chandler's church, may I say something to those of you who have quickly replaced your syringes when COVID-19 was all of the rage with Ukraine flags. Let me just tell you that there's still some big issues going on in the world that should perhaps occupy your attention outside of picking up stones to throw at Matt Chandler. Issues bigger than whether or not women should be pastors in the Southern Baptist Convention. I'm thinking about issues like this, that a Nigerian Christian woman was just murdered while she was cleaning her church by Muslims. And then how about this, that a Christian medical nonprofit is having to sue the state of Michigan over the fact that they are forcing doctors to prescribe cross-sex hormones. And how about this? The Wall Street Journal just released an opinion piece where it showed that there were studies that were fabricated by the American Academy of Pediatrics to show that the best treatment for teenagers is cross-sex hormones rather than watchful waiting or counseling or to try to help people address gender dysphoria, because the study released showed that there was no real mass formation psychosis happening within groups of teenagers that caused them to want to become trans, even though 9% in Gen Z of children are now coming out as transgender. So this study revealed that that was all a crock and that there was no findings for that. Well, little did we know that study was completely fabricated and based upon zero evidence whatsoever. So it was actually activism posing as science rather than actual science. Now, who would have believed that coming from the transgender community? So these things are going on, and I hope we can find at least a little bit of outrage to spare to put it where it actually belongs. So you just got done watching a small excerpt of a much larger episode. You can find the link to that full episode down below in the description of this video. So you definitely need to check that out, because if you like that clip, you'll like the much larger episode. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click that little bell to be notified when great new episodes of Indie Thinker come your way. Thanks for watching.